Officers with the Barnstable Police Department responded to an emergency call on February 27th of 2011 about a possible shooting at a residence located in the 10 block of Fresh Holes Road in Hyannis. Hyannis is located on Massachusetts' Cape Cod Peninsula. Upon arriving at the scene, first responders located the body of 31-year-old Todd Lampley in a bedroom. He suffered what appeared to be several gunshot wounds. A handgun, believed to be used to commit the crime, was later found to have been tossed in a nearby pond. Unfortunately, finding the weapon did not lead investigators to the suspect, and the case went cold for some time. Investigators did, however, find that the crime had lots of references to a show called The Wire. They found a phone at the crime scene, which was attached to the name Marlo Stanfield. Marlo Stanfield is the name of a fictional character in the show, and who headed up the most ruthless and feared drug ring in Baltimore. Todd was inside of his home at night when he was shot by someone standing outside of his bedroom window. Another link to The Wire. In Season 1 of the show, a fictitious woman who is cooperating with police is shot when the shooter stands outside of her window at night, taps the glass to get her attention, waits for her to approach the window, then fires a fatal shot into the home. Authorities also reported that they recovered a sweet potato from the scene of the fatal shooting. In Season 4 of The Wire, one of the fictional police investigators solves a case in which the shooter used a potato as a makeshift silencer when fatally shooting his victim. Recently, with advances in DNA technology, the sweet potato was sent for DNA analysis. It was then discovered that DeVaris Hampton's DNA was on the sweet potato. In addition to the DNA evidence, Hampton was wearing a court-ordered GPS device that tracked his whereabouts at the time of Todd's slaying. The location data from that device placed Hampton at the Fresh Holes Road residence at the approximate time the crime was committed, and later at the pond where the gun was recovered. Hampton and Todd also had a previous connection, with Hampton testifying in court that Todd was involved in the July 2007 slaying of Jacka Sellers in the same neighborhood. Sellers was also shot inside his home by someone shooting through a window from outside. This all led to 40-year-old DeVaris Hampton being arrested on February 24th of 2023 and charged with taking the life of Todd Lampley. Hampton appeared in Barnstable District Court, where he entered a plea of not guilty. He is scheduled to appear in court again on April 5th of 2023. In August of 1980, two field workers in Solano County, California, found the body of a woman in a field in unincorporated Dixon, around 20 miles southwest of Sacramento. The unknown woman suffered multiple gunshot wounds to the head and neck. For more than 10 years, she remained unidentified, listed in county records as only Jane Doe. In 1992, the victim was identified, thanks to the National Missing Persons Unit, as 21-year-old Holly Ann Campiglia from New Jersey. Holly Ann began running away from home when she was an 18-year-old freshman at Glassboro State College in New Jersey. Holly Ann's mother claimed that issues had began the year before while she was a senior in high school. That's when she began taking drugs and having emotional problems. "We don't know if one triggered another," said Mrs. Campiglia. When Holly Ann ran away the first time, she was found a month later walking on Route 70, about a mile away from the family home on Forest Hill Road off Springdale Road. She would go on to run away 4 more times. Each time she came back, she was less responsive to the medical treatment that she took for emotional problems, said Mrs. Campiglia. Her mother says the last time she saw her daughter was when she jumped from the car while going to a counseling center on June 10th of 1980. She said she wanted to get on with her life. "I want to see the world and do things my way." I tried to pull her back, but the car was on Route 70 near the Sheraton Post and I couldn't hold on to her. Her mother informed the Cherry Hill Police Department. We didn't hear from her for a month until we got a letter. It said she was living with 2 guys. We should try not to think of her anymore. We tried to trace the letter, but the return address wasn't a real street. The letter was mailed from Sacramento in July of 1980. All further leads went cold. Even though the sheriff's office identified her in 1992, they had no idea who was responsible for taking Holly Ann's life. In 2021, Holly Ann's family asked the Solano County Sheriff's Office to review the case and resubmit any original evidence for DNA analysis. That's exactly what investigators did. A few months later, their office received a report from the Serological Research Institute stating that male DNA was found on pieces of evidence that was collected back in 1980. Officials submitted that DNA to another database with the San Mateo Crime Lab in California and discovered that it belonged to someone already doing time for a serious crime. That man is Herman Lee Hobbs, who looks like something you'd find in a pyramid. Investigators found that 76-year-old Hobbs was serving a significant prison sentence for taking someone's life in 1975, for which he was convicted in 2005 in Sacramento. He assaulted and fatally stabbed 13-year-old Terry Peda in 1975. Terry vanished on the way home from her school in Rio Linda, which is a Sacramento suburb. Her body was found several days later, stuffed in a drain pipe. Hobbs also had been charged with taking the life of 29-year-old Brenda Ann Tucker, who went missing in 1994 from her home in Oroville. Loggers found her skull with a bullet hole in it in 2001 in Yuba County, and DNA identified her. Hobbs, who knew her family, was charged with her slaying in 2001. But a judge dismissed the case the next year for lack of evidence. In February of 2023, an arrest warrant was issued by a Solano County Superior Court judge, along with a removal order to have Hobbs transferred from state prison to Solano County Jail to face the new charges for what he did to Holly Ann. Officials think Hobbs may have committed other crimes and had this to say in their Facebook announcement. Detectives continue to work in collaboration with other Northern California agencies to potentially identify and/or solve additional cases that may be linked to Hobbs. We are grateful to the Campiglia family for their patience and assistance, and to the labs whose new technology allowed additional testing of older evidence, and to the staff who worked tirelessly to help bring closure to a lifetime of waiting, the sheriff's office said. Anyone with information about the homicide is asked to contact the Solano Sheriff Investigations at 707-784-7050. The sheriff's office also wanted to give a special mention to the original deputy who investigated Holly Ann's case, Jose or Joe Cisneros. His life was taken in the line of duty in 1985. His hard work is still helping solve cases over 40 years later. In October of 2004, 28-year-old Keysha Brown's body was found in a bathtub inside her apartment in the 700 block of East Flamingo Road. An autopsy revealed that Keysha had been strangled, stabbed, and assaulted by an unknown attacker. Witnesses interviewed at the time provided a description of a possible suspect seen entering and leaving the apartment, but that person was never identified. Forensic evidence was collected at the crime scene, but was unable to help in identifying the suspect at the time. In July of 2022, Detective Dan Long reviewed Keysha's case. He requested for additional DNA testing of evidence located on Keysha's body during her autopsy. While working the case, Dan Long realized that there are a lot of similarities with crimes that took place in 2005. All of those crimes involved Norman Flowers. Flowers in 2011 had entered an Alford plea for charges against him that he took the lives of 45-year-old Mary Lee Coote and 24-year-old Reina Gonzalez. An Alford plea means Flowers didn't admit guilt but acknowledged prosecutors could prove their case against him. In exchange, prosecutors agreed to stipulate the 2 consecutive life prison terms without the possibility of parole instead of executing him. Mary Lee's body was found inside her Russell Road apartment on May 3rd of 2005. She had been assaulted and strangled. Flowers' DNA was discovered on her body. 8 hours later, Rena's body was found in the same complex. She had been strangled with a telephone cord. In October of 2008, Flowers was convicted and given a life sentence because he took the life of 18-year-old Sheila Quarles also in 2005. Flowers had previously spent time in prison, had been paroled twice, and was out of prison for about 20 days when he took Sheila's life. With the crimes being so similar, Detective Dan Long was convinced that Norman Flowers was responsible for taking the life of Keysha Brown. It was only in February of 2023, however, when DNA linked Flowers to Keysha's crime scene, and that it could be confirmed that he is responsible. Metropolitan Police Department Lieutenant Jason Johansson made the announcement to the public. As Johansson spoke during the press conference, members of Keysha's family stood behind him, wiping tears from their eyes. Keysha's daughter, Keysha Brown, briefly spoke through tears. "I just want to say thank you to the police department," she said. Flowers remains at High Desert State Prison, where he is serving 3 life sentences. "30-year-old Deborah Lee Atrops lived in Salem, Oregon in 1988. She had an 8-month-old daughter with her husband, 34-year-old Robert Atrops. Robert was living in the couple's home in Sherwood, and Deborah lived in an apartment in Salem because by November of 1988, Deborah and Robert had been separated for 5 months. On November 29th of the same year, Robert went to pick up their daughter from a babysitter in Newberg, Oregon, while Deborah was at a hair appointment in Tigard. Deborah was expected to be home before 8 p.m., but she never showed up. Robert then called several friends and family members to see if they knew where Deborah was before reporting her missing to the Tigard Police Department. The next day, Robert told investigators he had still not heard from his wife. Deborah's car was then entered into the databases used by law enforcement as a vehicle connection to a missing person. Deborah's black Honda Accord was recovered by police officers in Beaverton, Oregon on December 1st of 1988. A city public works employee reported a suspicious abandoned car with keys in the driver's seat located at the end of Southwest Murray Road. Witnesses said the car had been parked there since early on November 30th. The 2-door sedan also had its driver's side window down and was missing the license plates. In the trunk of the car, investigators discovered Deborah's body. She had been strangled. Based on the positioning of her body, it was determined that she had been placed there after her life was taken. Despite more than 3 decades of investigation, the case unfortunately went cold. Detectives with the Washington County District Attorney's Office Cold Case Unit reopened the case in 2021, about a year after forming a partnership with the Washington County Sheriff's Office. The Cold Case Unit was formed in 2020 after receiving a grant from the U.S. Department of Justice. For the next year and a half, investigators re-interviewed multiple witnesses and had forensic evidence re-examined. All of this led to Robert Atrops being charged with taking Deborah's life on February 28th of 2023, where he was indicted by a grand jury. He was booked into the Washington County Jail. Washington County District Attorney Kevin Barton had this to say: "I am proud of the work our cold case unit has done to ensure that victims and cases are not forgotten despite the passage of time. Being able to use today's technology and apply it towards evidence that was seized over 30 years ago is a huge advantage in terms of challenges. We may think of these cases as old, or we may use the word cold, but if you talk to the family and friends of the victims of these cases, they're very current issues for them, Barton said. They're still dealing with the trauma as a result of that crime. Barton also said that he can't give all the details that led to the arrest at this time, as it's still an ongoing investigation. On May 11th of 2007, 64-year-old Dennis Lee First's body was found at his apartment in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. He had been stabbed and beaten. According to Tammy Mims, assistant manager for the Hawthorne Hills apartments where Dennis lived, said he had prostate cancer, didn't have many visitors, and lived on Social Security. Tammy said that when a friend called and asked her to check on Dennis, she notified Robert Gross, a maintenance employee at the apartments. Robert knocked several times on Dennis's door, and when no one answered, he entered the residence. Inside, he found Dennis lying face up on the bed, feet on the floor. Robert then saw all the blood and called 911. Evidence collected at the scene was sent to the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigations State Crime Lab in Ankeny for testing. Dennis's first wife, Christine Burmeister, said that he had a rough life. It's hard to believe somebody would stab him. He could hardly get around. Denise and Christine had 2 children. Their son Brad was born in 1963 and their daughter Laura in 1965. In the 1970s, the couple lived in Olin in Jones County, where Dennis worked as a purchasing agent at a Monticello steel company. He'd been living in Cedar Rapids since the couple's 1981 divorce. In 1990, Dennis had been arrested on charges of stealing from local businesses and for drunken driving. He'd also been accused of threatening a man from whom he rented a room. Things didn't get any better for Dennis after his son lost his life in 1993 in an auto accident. Dennis eventually lost touch with his daughter, ex-wife, and other relatives, but had begun calling them again a few years prior to his demise. In late May of 2007, Cedar Rapids police served 5 search warrants in the case, searching not only Dennis's apartment, but that of Curtis Paget. Investigators took his fingerprints and a DNA sample with a swab from inside his cheek. They also took a pair of his boots from his apartment. Paget was the last known person to have seen 15-year-old Erin K. Pospisil, who went missing from Cedar Rapids on June 3rd of 2001. Paget, a friend of Erin's older brother, told police that in 2001 he was leaving the Pospisil home at the same time as Erin and agreed to give her a ride to her friend Britt's home. According to Paget, when they arrived at Britt's house, no one answered the door, and Paget claimed that as Erin walked back to his truck, a black Chevrolet Cavalier with tinted rear windows pulled up to the curb. He said Erin went up to the car and had a short conversation with someone, and then told him, "These guys will give me a ride," before getting into the Cavalier's back seat. Police could find no other witnesses to substantiate Paget's story about a black Cavalier in the neighborhood, and Erin has not been seen since leaving her home with Paget. Finally, on March 1st of 2023, 42-year-old Curtis Randall Paget was arrested and charged with taking Dennis First's life. Lynn County Attorney Nick Maybanks said this case was a testament to the Cedar Rapids Police Department's commitment to victims and the community. This case shows that the department persists in seeking justice for victims and survivors, even in cases that may be hidden from the public eye. After the department's cold case unit approached Maybanks to review the case, and after several months of follow-up and a recent final consultation, Maybanks determined that Paget was responsible for taking Dennis's life. Police didn't say what exactly led to Paget's arrest, whether it was further DNA testing or something else. It was, however, later mentioned in the news conference that a partial blood boot print was found at Dennis's home that matches boots found at Paget's home. An oven mitt soiled with blood was also found. It contained both Dennis's and Paget's DNA on the inside of the oven mitt. Paget's fingerprint was also found on a knife sharpener in Dennis's apartment in a drawer. There's been no updates on Aaron's case, just a reliable sighting in the spring of 2002. Aaron was spotted at a convenience store in Cedar Rapids. She was riding in the back seat of a car with Illinois license plates. This tip was provided to Cedar Rapids police. However, the car was not found. They have never been able to verify the sighting. The person who saw Aaron knows her well and is still convinced that it was her. Aaron is described as a Caucasian female, dark brown hair, dark brown eyes. Aaron has a small scar above her eye and had red highlights in her hair at the time of her disappearance. If you have any information, please call the Cedar Rapids Police Department at this number. In December of 1992, the body of 31-year-old Lori Ann Perera was found in the desert area of Las Vegas, Nevada. A Las Vegas resident who was out walking his dog just east of the Montgomery Ward's retail store, located at 2875 East Charleston Boulevard, made the discovery. Lori had apparent ligature marks on both ankles and both wrists, and it appeared tape had been placed over her mouth. The Clark County Medical Examiner ruled the cause as asphyxia due to manual strangulation with blunt force trauma to the head after a complete autopsy of her body. 13 months later, in January of 1994, the body of 35-year-old Pearl Wilson Ingram was found in the dumpster behind the Vons grocery store located at 4440 East Charleston Boulevard in Las Vegas, Nevada by an employee of Silver State Disposal while on his normal trash collection route. Trash had been placed over Pearl's body in an effort to conceal her. After an autopsy was conducted, the Clark County Medical Examiner ruled that Pearl had been strangled. During the autopsy, it was noted several of Pearl's teeth were missing and she had abrasions on the bridge of her nose and above her eye. For the next 3 decades, the cases of Lori and Pearl were reviewed by numerous Las Vegas Metro Police Department detectives in hopes of developing new evidence. In March of 2007, when detectives took a new look at Lori's case, they found male DNA on a swab that was taken from her body during the autopsy. They requested that further forensic DNA work be conducted. A DNA profile of the culprit was created and entered into CODIS, but no matches could be made. In July of 2012, detectives took a new look at Pearl's case. During this time, male DNA was found on a swab taken from her body as well. The DNA evidence was again entered into CODIS, and on that same date, Las Vegas Metro Police Department officers were notified of a CODIS hit linking DNA from an unknown contributor to both Lori and Pearl. This confirmed the same person committed both crimes. This was a huge breakthrough, connecting these two cases that otherwise would have not been connected. In June of 2022, investigators requested a genealogical investigation to be performed by Othram Inc. Based on research from Othram's in-house genetic genealogy team, a preliminary suspect was identified as Eddie George Snowden Jr. He was born in January of 1937. Checks conducted on Snowden revealed he had listed his address in the 2800 block of East Charleston, Las Vegas. Lori Ann Perera's body was recovered at the 2700 block of East Charleston Boulevard in December of 1992 and 1.9 miles away from where Pearl Ingram's body was recovered in January of 1994. Additionally, Snowden's criminal history revealed he was living in the Las Vegas area at the time of both crimes. It also appears from Snowden's criminal history that he lived from 1956 to 1979 in the Fresno, California area, as well as several surrounding cities to include Sacramento, Santa Cruz, Madera, Merced, Woodland, and Watsonville areas. Las Vegas Metro Police Department cold case investigators were able to obtain familial reference DNA from one of Snowden's biological family members to confirm he was indeed the person who assaulted, beat, and strangled both Lori Ann Perera and Pearl Wilson Ingram. Unfortunately, no arrests will be made in these two cases due to the fact Eddie George Snowden passed away in Las Vegas, Nevada in February of 2017 at the age of 80. The Las Vegas Police Department released a statement where they said that they wished to thank the Fresno, California Police Department, Othram, and the Vegas Justice League for their continued support in their endeavor to find justice to all victims as well as some form of resolution to their families, friends, and our community. As Snowden was born in 1937, he would have been 52 years old when he took Lori's life. It is unlikely that he started committing crimes in his 50s, so investigators are working to see if he is responsible for any others. A news conference was held on February 6th of 2023 to announce the identification of Snowden. Pearl's younger sister, Teresa Board, said that the word of her sister's assailant being identified by authorities brought much-needed closure to her family. On June 4th of 2006, hikers discovered a decomposing body a few miles from Lyons in the South St. Vrain Canyon in Colorado. Deputies and detectives discovered that the female body appeared to have been pulled from a shallow grave by a predator. Deputies located a pair of yellow ski pants, a sleeping bag, a pillow and a pillowcase all neatly folded near the grave. Because of the condition of the woman's body, investigators were unable to identify her by her fingerprints. The sheriff's office said that the only object detectives found with the woman's body was a cross ring. The coroner's office was not able to determine the cause due to the condition of her body. Foul play was suspected because her body had been buried. Her body had evidence of animal predation but lacked any gunshot wounds, broken bones, or stab wounds. The coroner noted that he could not rule out strangulation. About 50 pounds of a white powdery substance containing calcium oxide, also known as quicklime, was located on the body as well as in and around the gravesite to a depth of approximately 14 inches. The sheriff's office asked the public for tips to try to identify the victim. Numerous tips were followed up on, including information of missing women from around the country. Jason Olkers with the Boulder County Sheriff's Office recalled how sad it was because of the huge number of missing women in the metro area and country and what the family members were going through. The Sheriff's Office followed up on hundreds of names while using resources from the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, the Colorado Bureau of Investigations, and other places to try to identify the victim. In October of 2006, the Sheriff's Office received a tip from a friend of the victim who reported her missing. A woman reached out to the Longmont Police Department to report that she hadn't seen her friend in a long time. She identified her friend as Angie Wilds. With this information, investigators were able to identify a person named Angela Wilds who had ties to the Longmont area. The friend provided a physical description of Angela, which matched the body found in the canyon. The woman also described a ring her friend was known to wear that seemed similar to the ring found with the remains. In November of 2006, DNA analysis by the sheriff's office comparing rib bones from the body with 4 of Angela's sisters confirmed the victim was 38-year-old Angela Wilds from the Longmont, Colorado area. Angela was last seen in April of 2006, 2 months before her body was found and 6 months before she was identified. Angela did not have a home or steady employment and essentially lived with friends while frequently sleeping on couches. Investigators interviewed family, friends, and acquaintances of Angela, but were unable to find out what happened to her. It was determined that DNA found on the ski pants belonged to Angela Wilds. There was also DNA from an unknown male contributor on the pants, the sleeping bag, and the pillowcase. On January 22nd of 2009, investigators received information from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation linking John Angerer to the crime scene through DNA. Armed with both names, investigators were able to look into any connections between Angela and Angerer. They found that several people had reported seeing them together in late 2005 and early 2006. A buccal swab from Angerer was compared to the items recovered from the scene, and his DNA was determined to be the major contributor profile on the pillowcase and in the sleeping bag. On August 26th of 2009, Angerer was interviewed by a detective with the Anchorage Police Department in Alaska. Angerer reported that in February or March of 2006, he had attended a dive school in Texas and then gone to Colorado. There, he lived in Canyon City, Longmont, and Monte Vista until July of 2006. He said he moved to Alaska that August. During the interview, Angerer claimed he did not know anybody by the name of Angie or Angela. When shown her photo, he said he did not recognize her. He was again interviewed that September by the Boulder County Sheriff's Office, where he again denied knowing a person named Angie or Angela. He also vehemently denied camping in the South St. Vrain area around the time of the crime. According to members of his family, Angerer frequently visited a cave in South St. Vrain area and hiked and camped around it. The cave was off Highway 7, about 3 or 4 miles from Lyons, according to his parents. His sister recalled dropping him off in the area where Angela's body would be later found. Investigators drafted an arrest warrant for Angerer, which was authorized by a judge, and then in 2010 he was arrested and charged with taking Angela Wilds' life. The Fort Collins, Coloradoan reported on March 5th of 2010 that Angerer was serving time in an Alaskan prison for a probation violation charge when authorities issued the warrant for his arrest. His preliminary hearing was held on July 12th of 2010. However, after this hearing, a judge determined that probable cause did not support the charge and the case was dismissed. It was decided that there was not enough evidence to move forward with a prosecution. Public Defender Seth Temin said at the hearing that they need to produce evidence first that John Angerer is the person who took her life. They haven't done that, Judge. They can't even place him at the scene where her body was found, nor can they say how or where she lost her life. The following summer, the Colorado Supreme Court decided not to review the judge's decision. After the preliminary hearing, several people who knew Angerer described him as volatile, and one witness reported seeing him try to strangle one of his ex-girlfriends. For the past few years, the Boulder County Sheriff's Office and District Attorney's Office, with the help from Colorado Bureau of Investigation and Federal Bureau of Investigation, continued to work on this case, interviewing new witnesses and consulting with forensic pathologists. This included previous girlfriends who said Angerer tried to strangle them and was frightening and jealous and possessive. One witness said that certain women's names, including Angela, would send Angerer into a rage. In 2015, a pathologist reviewed Angela's case. He determined that someone took her life, but was still unable to say the exact cause. The pathologist said he took the investigative findings into account, including that Angela was found naked in a secluded wooded area and covered with lime. Ultimately, he said, an asphyxia event was most likely. At the time of this determination, the pathologist was not aware of the previously alleged incidents of strangulation against John Angerer. One of Angerer's exes, who is no longer in contact with him, had plenty to tell investigators. Previously, in 2009, she said that Angerer never strangled her. This time, in 2023, she told investigators that Angerer had strangled her repeatedly during the relationship. She reported that Angerer had once destroyed her tent because she did not want to live in the woods with him. He became more volatile and frightening when he was drinking or using drugs, she said. 2 other potential witnesses told police in December of 2022 that they saw Angerer and Angela together in the Bar El Motel in Longmont, Colorado, which is about 10 miles from the crime scene in the South St. Vrain Canyon along Highway 7. Police searched the motel's records and found the 2 stayed there between December 26th of 2005 and January 4th of 2006. As a result of recent years' work, authorities took this significant and new evidence and presented its findings to a grand jury. On February 16th of 2023, that grand jury returned an indictment. The indictment was sealed until Angerer was taken into custody in Alaska. On March 9th of 2023, 53-year-old John Michael Angerer was arrested in Anchorage, Alaska, in connection with what happened to Angela Josephine Wilds. His bond was set at $1 million. Boulder County Sheriff Curtis Johnson said, "I am glad that we were able to move our investigation into the case of Angela Wilds forward. I am proud that our detectives didn't give up on this cold case. We know Angela's family has been waiting a long time for this day to come. Her family is in our thoughts as we take the next steps in this important judicial process. Investigators are currently looking into the possibility that John Angerer might be responsible for other crimes in Colorado and Alaska." If you have any information about this case, about Angela, or about John Angerer, please contact Boulder County Sheriff's Office Detective Mike McKinley at 303-441-4692. Angela's sister Tammy Benson said, "I hope this time the courts, the judge, and everybody listens and that he gets what's coming to him." Tammy described her sister as loving and kind, and the prosecutors answered her prayers when they charged Angerer for the second time. On April 28th of 1997, the city of Thousand Oaks, California was considered one of the safest places to live in the country by the FBI. It was a utopia in America until 10:20 a.m. That's when Thousand Oaks and Los Angeles County were never the same. On that Monday at Western Financial Bank, there was a manager and 3 tellers. There was no security guard, no locking the front door. There was no plexiglass to protect or separate employees. The tellers were sitting ducks when 2 armed men walked in. They had nylon stockings over their faces, and they were disguised as construction workers. They had reflective vests on to draw attention away from their faces. The robbers got all the employees into the back room, in front of the safe. Bank teller Monica Leech was ordered to open it. It would be the last thing she ever did. She led them to the vault, gave them the money, and did everything they demanded, and for unknown reasons, one of the 2 men held a gun to the back of her head and shot her. Monica was the only one who was shot. She succumbed to her injuries on the vault room floor. To the robbers, her life was worth a few $1,000s. They got away with $9 grand. Shortly after this brutal crime, local banks and donors raised $160,000 in reward money for whoever turned in the suspects. There was surveillance video. The images weren't great, but they were still usable. Witness descriptions also helped produce composite sketches. Police even got the getaway car, and yet no arrests. The case sadly went cold. Monica's husband, Floyd Leech, spoke publicly in 2021 about the crime. He was 43 years old back in 1997. Floyd said that Thousand Oaks was a place where people left their doors unlocked. It is where he lived for most of his life and where he met his second wife, Monica. That morning, she left for work and we gave each other a kiss and said, "See you later." She walked out of the door to go to her job, and I walked out of the door to go to my job, he said. I think about it a lot. Every time I talk to one of her kids, it comes back. Her kids now have kids. I'm still close with all of her family, Floyd Leech said. Monica and Floyd met in church. Their love blossomed beautifully and naturally. It was the first time Floyd felt happy in months. 6 months prior, my first wife had passed of a medical condition, so we started hanging around together and then started dating. 7 months after we started dating, we got married. When Monica and I decided to get married, my oldest son said, "You're not going to replace my mom," and she said, "I'm not trying to." And then shortly after that, they got very, very close. My second son was always close with her. Monica was very instrumental in helping my boys out as well as her own family. We didn't have any his and hers. I loved her kids, she loved my kids, and it worked out very, very well. Monica worked in banking for 20 years. After she got married to Floyd, to become closer to home, she transferred to Western Financial Bank. This is what Floyd said about the crime. It wasn't a video game that you can just reset and make it all back the way it was. She was a real person. She was very loving and loved her family and her kids. I believe that if people do bad things, they need to pay for what they do. Getting those guys would just close a chapter in my life. Not the memories, but as far as closing the chapter of wondering where these guys are and what they're doing today, Floyd said. Investigators for many years were convinced the two men were members of the Crips gang. To get a better understanding of why investigators believe this, Dr. Georgia Leap was interviewed to explain. She is a professor at the University of California, Los Angeles, and has been working with gangs for 40 years. The Crips are really one of the oldest gangs in the Southwest Angeles area. Their roots are very much here. Ironically, they have spread all over the world. I've met Crips gang members from Australia. I think it's significant to add that while their reputation lies in the fact that they've been involved in gang activity and criminal behavior, they've also been involved in some significant social services. To understand the Crips is to understand a very lengthy, very complex picture of street organization that began in the Southern California area, Leap said. What happened in South Los Angeles is the factories that were nearby on Alameda Street began to close down, and job opportunities and income narrowed significantly. When those factories closed in the 1970s, thousands of people lost their jobs, and the area never recovered, Leap said. The same decade, California voters approved Prop 13. That was a big win for homeowners. It capped property tax increases, but it meant a huge cut to programs that those taxes paid for, like school programs, law enforcement, and social services. Many joined gangs to make some money. In the late 80s to the early 90s, in order to make money, the Crips largely sold drugs. The gang generally made enough money to get by. What radically changed the game, according to Crips member Perry Dideau, was the movie Point Break. He says what the movie did is give a blueprint to some kids on how to rob a bank. And just like that, seemingly overnight, Southern California became the bank robbery capital of the country. Captain Eric Buschow with the Ventura County Sheriff's Department explained, "There are banks on virtually every corner throughout Southern California. A lot of them are located in convenient places where it's easy to get off the freeway and stop in and take care of a transaction, especially going back before ATMs. Banks invested in security, based on certain branches being frequent targets of robberies. The ones that were either less frequently robbed or virtually never robbed, that might have been a little further outlying and not right next to a freeway corridor, there was less investment in security, said Bouchow. During the 90s, Southern California became the Wild West. At its peak in 1992, the FBI estimates more than 2,600 banks were robbed. That's an average of 7 banks per day. And instead of fighting each other in South Los Angeles, gangs started venturing to places like Thousand Oaks. That was their preferred method of getting money, was going around doing these takeover robberies, you know? The FBI had numerous cases throughout Southern California that were part of an organized criminal street gang, said Bouchow. Captain Bouchow also talked more about Monica's case specifically in 2021. We don't often see something go this long without the right pieces of information coming into our lab, especially at the time with that larger award. There were banks that came together and put up money to encourage people to come forward. The vehicle was later recovered. They repainted it. We have those pieces of evidence. We have those handcuffs. We have the evidence collected from inside the bank. We just need to get all those last couple of pieces to carry this cross to the goal line, said Bouchow. Also, in 2021, with advances in DNA technology, it seemed like the case will finally be solved. Christina Tekatlane, who is a forensic scientist and local CODIS administrator for Ventura County Sheriff's Office Forensic Service Bureau, explained the process. Touch DNA is when somebody basically touches an item and deposits some of their cells onto it. These cells have considerably less DNA in them than body fluids like blood or saliva. So with technology advancing over the years, it's gotten a lot more sensitive to be able to detect smaller amounts of DNA. This has become very helpful in cases where the only evidence available is touch DNA. On March 14th of 2023, authorities announced that 55-year-old Kevin Ray James was arrested in connection with Monica's case. He was arrested 5 days earlier on March 9th in San Bernardino, California, and charged with taking Monica's life. James was transported and booked into Ventura County Jail. James apparently lived in the Los Angeles area at the time of the robbery and was described as a gang member during the news conference. Authorities stressed that they still have not identified the second suspect involved in the robbery. A $30,000 FBI reward for information on that person remains in place, as does a $100,000 reward from Crime Stoppers. Anyone with information about the case or the second suspect is asked to call the Sheriff's Office Major Crime Bureau at 805-383-8704 or email them at coldcase@ventura.org. Ventura County District Attorney Eric Nasarenko had this to say at the news conference. This was a senseless, unprovoked, and vicious crime. He added that Monica Leech grew up in the Somis community of Ventura County, was a proud graduate of Rio Mesa High School, and came from a banking family. She liked needlepoint and going for walks in the morning and was described as a beloved wife, daughter, and mother who helped raise 4 children. Dr. Rick Schwartzberg is a chiropractor who had an office next to the bank where Monica worked and got to know her well in the 2 months that she worked there. He said, "It was definitely a normal day at first, at least I thought it was. In between patients, I'd often go over to my office, which overlooked the parking lot. And that's when I saw somebody just barrel right by my office super fast. It was unusual. So I took note, but I didn't hear anything, so I went and saw the next patient in the room. That's when I got the call immediately to come out because one of the tellers was there saying that Monica had been shot. Everybody was saying, is there anything you can do to help? I said, I can try. During the CPR part, obviously, maybe for a second it looked like things might be improving, but it was pretty rapidly apparent that it wasn't. Mary Agnes Moroney was born in Chicago, Illinois on May 9th of 1928, the first of two daughters to Michael and Catherine Moroney. The couple started their family just before the Great Depression hit. The family lived in poverty as Michael only made $15 per week passing out handbills. A relative of Catherine's wrote to a welfare agency and a paragraph on their plight was printed. The service did not normally disclose addresses, but through a slip, the family's address 5200 Wentworth Avenue was learned by a woman. On May 14th of 1930, Mary Agnes's mother answered a knock at her door and was greeted by a woman who claimed to have been sent by a social worker to deal with the Moroney's case. She was described as well-dressed, about 22 years of age, protruding teeth, and a cultured voice. The woman identified herself as Julia Otis. After Catherine disclosed the family's many problems, the woman asked if she could temporarily take Mary Agnes to California with her, adding that she will be unrecognizable and fat as a butterball. Catherine refused. After promising to return, the woman handed Catherine $2 and left. The following day, the woman came back, this time with baby clothes, as Catherine was pregnant. The woman stated that she had arranged to get a better job for Catherine's husband, Michael, and offered to take Mary Agnes to a nearby store to buy her some clothes and shoes. Reluctantly, Catherine gave her consent. Later, she commented that Mary Agnes sobbed and refused to go with the woman, but was taken anyway. Mary Agnes and the unidentified woman never returned. Mary Agnes's parents reached out to the police and began to search for their missing daughter. The Moroney family received a letter from Julia Otis the day after she took Mary Agnes. It read, "Please don't be alarmed. I have taken your little girl to California with me. I have hired a special nurse to take care for her. We'll be back in 2 months. By that time, you will be on your feet again and you will be able to care for her." She didn't even cry a bit. She is outfitted like a princess. In the meantime, I'll help all I can do to get you on your feet. Don't worry about her or anything else. When you get this letter, we'll be on our way already. As ever, Julia Otis. This was the last the Moroneys ever heard from the woman who claimed to be quote-unquote Julia Otis. Police scoured Chicago's railroad stations for any clue that Mary Agnes had been taken on a train. 2 weeks after the kidnapping, a woman who identified herself as Alice Henderson sent the Moroneys a letter in which she stated that Otis was her cousin and that she was love-hungry because her own husband had a baby and passed away over the year before. Henderson never wrote again, and authorities state that the letter from Otis was written in the same handwriting as the one written by Henderson. Unfortunately, investigators were not able to find Mary Agnes or the woman who took her. Throughout the years, there were various sightings, but nothing that could be confirmed, and the case went cold. Stories about Mary Agnes would appear in the newspaper now and then, particularly when other children went missing. Her story eventually caught the attention of Chicago Daily News reporter Eden Wright, who noticed something about the Moroney family in a photo. All the members of the family resembled each other, the newspaper wrote. The Chicago Daily News convinced a California newspaper to print pictures of the Moroney family, hoping it would lead to Mary Agnes. The pictures were apparently spotted by a man who claimed one of Mary Agnes's sisters looked so much like his wife that it could have been her in the photograph. The woman is Mary McClelland, a 24-year-old housewife. In 1952, she came forward claiming that by looking at the photos of Mary Agnes's siblings, she suspected she was Mary, the missing girl. 6 more siblings were born after Mary Agnes disappeared. Mary McClelland had been adopted within a year of the kidnapping by Charles and Nora Beck. Dr. Krause, after studying and comparing her dental casts, named her as one of the family. Mary McClelland's skull and blood showed she was a Moroney, according to the doctor, and he said Catherine Moroney claimed to recognize her, which was not the case. On September 3rd of 1952, The Chicago Daily News ran the following words atop its front page: 22-year search for kidnapped baby ends. It claimed characteristics in McClelland's teeth helped identify her as Mary Agnes, and the newspaper arranged a meeting between McClelland and Catherine Moroney. Catherine said, "She's a great lady, fantastic person. I wish she was my daughter, but no." An aging physician named Dr. E.W. Merithu stated that he delivered Mary McClelland to an unknown mother on November 17th of 1927, and that her mother provided a baby picture of her daughter dating from 1928, which proved she had been adopted 2 years before the kidnapping. Furthermore, Mary Agnes underwent an operation for a ruptured navel, but Mary McClelland did not have the scar Mary Agnes had at the time of her disappearance. Further DNA testing proved she was not Mary Agnes. She passed away in 2005. A DNA test performed in 2008, following Mary McClelland's passing, conclusively determined that she was not Mary Agnes. In February of 2023, it was announced that DNA testing had determined a link between Mary Agnes's surviving family and relatives of Jeanette Burchard, a Florida resident who passed away in 2003 at the age of 75. Jeanette Burchard was raised as an only child, married twice, had 3 children, and spent more than 50 years as a nurse. Jeanette's family was told that she was born on April 14th of 1928, and that her biological father passed away 2 months after she was born, and that she spent the first 6 years of her life in Chicago. She was raised by Jeanette Soleric Darris Anderson and a stepfather, Frank Darris. The pair raised Jeanette as a devout Catholic. Jeanette married Edward Jennings. Decades later, she married again, that time to Earl Burchard. Both of her husbands have since passed away. Jeanette had 3 children: Terry Arnold, Barbara Joan Jennings, who passed away in 2006, and Edward Clifton Jennings Jr., who passed away in 2004. Jeanette's daughter, Terry Arnold of Florida, who is still alive, has suddenly found herself entangled in a historic Chicago cold case. Terry said she was contacted in September of 2022 by a Cook County detective who had questions about her late mother and asked if she would be willing to take a DNA test. At first, Terry thought it could not be right. Then she decided to take the DNA test just to prove the detective wrong. The results came back on October 28th of 2022 and revealed all was not as it seemed. Though the maternal side of Jeanette Burchard's family was Polish, Terry said her DNA results revealed she is not. She is mainly Irish. The Moroneys are also Irish. Terry told the Chicago Sun-Times that she's since learned my family is completely different from what I was always led to believe. And she said she's very confident her mother was Mary Agnes. Terry said her mother loved her pets, opera, and the Miami Dolphins. Her life apparently began in Chicago, but most importantly, she was the world's greatest mom. We adored my mother. A granddaughter of Jeanette Burchard, Lori Hart, acknowledged the pain that Mary Agnes's disappearance must have caused the Moroneys. But she said that she's still blessed to have had Jeanette Burchard as her grandmother. Anytime I needed her, she was there, Lori Hart said. Mary Agnes's nephew, 55-year-old Don Moroney of downstate Flanagan, is also convinced his aunt has been found. Don, Terry, and Lori believe Jeanette Burchard was Mary Agnes because of the work of Cook County Sheriff's Office Detective Jose Rodriguez. He was assigned in June of 2022 to investigate Mary Agnes's disappearance as part of Sheriff Tom Dart's Missing Persons Project. Jose Rodriguez and Commander Jason Moran said commercial DNA testing revealed the genetic association between Terry Arnold and members of Don Moroney's family suggested they were all cousins. That left Terry trying to make sense of a new family history, but it also offered closure to the Moroney family, which has been at the center of the case for 93 years. Mary Agnes's mother, Catherine, was haunted by the loss of her daughter and fell into a deep depression. Catherine passed away in 1962 at the age of 49. She was only 17 years old when Mary Agnes was kidnapped. Mary Agnes's father, Michael, passed away in 1957 when he was 58. His final words were said to be, "They never found my baby girl." Don Moroney said the family had always hoped whatever happened to his aunt, that she led a good life and she was taken care of, and she was. Terry said that she had never before heard the name Julia Otis, and she doesn't know how her mother came to be raised by Terry's grandmother. All I know is she ended up with her, and I just feel bad that the parents never knew what happened to their daughter. Either way, the Moroney family can honestly truly know that she was very much loved. Terry also said that if her mother was still alive to learn the news, she's sure that she would have reached out to the Moroneys. She would have gone to the family and said, "I am here. I am fine."